Aside from an 11-year stint as a republic in the 1600s, Britain has been ruled by a monarchy for around 1,200 years. It is the sixth oldest monarchy in the world, and its authority has endured through uprisings, revolutions, and two world wars. In this video, we will take a journey from the beginnings of the British monarchy up to the current king, detailing the highs and lows along the way. The first time England was ruled by what we would now refer to as a monarchy was in 871 with Alfred the Great. However, it is generally considered that the English monarchy began in 1066, when William the Conqueror became King of England. William the Conqueror permanently unified the English kingdoms, and as he also ruled Normandy, he began a centuries-long conflict over land between the rulers of England and France. William's authority is well recorded by his creation of Britain's earliest public record, entitled the Domesday Book. He was one of the most powerful monarchs in the medieval world, and although the English royal house has changed names over the years, every British monarch can trace their ancestry back to William the Conqueror. The authority of the British monarchy grew until 1215, when the first official limitations were put in place. When King John came to power, wars with France and a shortage of money brought the king into conflict with the powerful barons. Eventually, in an attempt to avoid a civil war, King John had to change how the monarchy's authority worked. New laws were written that restricted the authority of the king, ensuring that the monarch was not above the law. These new laws were written down in the Magna Carta, which John was forced to sign. However, John never really intended to honor the Magna Carta and secured its annulment with the help of Pope Innocent III, who declared that it was illegal as it had been signed under duress. John kept his authority as king, but it resulted in a civil war that lasted until John's death. John was succeeded by his 9-year-old son Henry III, and an amended charter was issued. These charters continued to be revised and reissued until 1297, when they were copied into the statute roll under King Edward I. Despite granting more power to the government, the British monarchy continued to try to expand its authority over the entirety of the British Isles and parts of France. Despite areas of France sporadically being under English control, Wales, Scotland, and Ireland were historically and fiercely independent. The first to be conquered by England was Wales in the late 13th century, when Edward I claimed it as a territory of England. Edward then attempted to bring Scotland under English authority, which kicked off the First War of Scottish Independence. Despite Edward's declaration that Wales was an English territory, Wales was not officially part of the English kingdom until King Henry VIII passed the Act of Union in the mid-1500s, which extended English laws into Wales. The 1500s also saw the tentative beginnings of the British Empire. While Spain and Portugal had started the European scramble for international territory, England was relatively slow off the mark. However, under Queen Elizabeth, the English monarchy began to expand its authority overseas. Elizabeth first set her sights on Ireland. Due to the growing power of Spain, Elizabeth worried that Spanish King Philip would invade Ireland and use it as a base to launch an attack on England. After the Earl of Desmond failed to stop a rebellion in Munster, Elizabeth sent troops to take over lands there. By 1585, around 300,000 acres of land had been handed over to English planters. Large estates were given to Englishmen of influence, including Sir Walter Raleigh, who had a hand in attempting to extend the authority of the British monarchy further. As Spain was exploiting the Americas, which had previously been unknown to Europeans, Raleigh thought it would be prudent to get in on the action. In 1587, he funded an expedition to establish a small English colony on the island of Roanoke. The colony was not successful, and its disappearance is as yet unexplained. However, the area still bears the marks of the British monarchical authority, as Virginia got its name from Raleigh, who named it in honor of Queen Elizabeth, who was known as the Virgin Queen. Meanwhile, back in England, the monarchy struggled to bring all the British Isles under its authority. Scotland managed to keep its independence until 1603, when the Scottish King James VI became King James I of England. However, despite sharing a king, the two nations remained politically separate for the next 100 years. In 1607, England's colonization of North America began in earnest. On May 4th of that year, the first permanent English settlement was established in Jamestown, named after King James I. Establishing this colony brought in more tradable items. James also extended his authority through trade with other areas of the known world, establishing connections with India in 1608 using the East India Trading Company that had been formed under a charter granted by Queen Elizabeth in 1600. The British monarchy continued to preside over its imperial expansion until James's son, Charles I, arrived on the scene, and when the British royals' authority was nearly ended for good. James had often clashed with Parliament over the extent of monarchical authority. James felt that the king's authority came directly from God, and although he accepted that the king was not above the law, he did not like it. Specifically, James felt that he should not be beholden to the government regarding foreign policy and royal finances. After refusing to hold Parliament until financial pressures during the 30 Years' War forced his hand in 1621, James threatened to dissolve Parliament after refusing to discuss aspects of foreign policy. When Charles inherited the throne in 1625, England was on the brink of war with Spain, and relations between the Crown and Parliament were strained. Charles continued his father's refusal to discuss foreign policies, and when his first Parliament met, Charles would not provide any information about the failing Spanish War or its costs. To add to the tensions, most of the people in the House of Commons were Puritans, while the king supported what would become known as the High Church Party. Relations between Charles and Parliament were so strained that after 1629, Charles did not call a parliament for 11 years. The conflict eventually resulted in a civil war, which broke out in 1642. After years of fighting, Charles was tried for high treason and crimes against the realm of England. Although Charles refused to acknowledge the authority of the court, maintaining that a king cannot be tried by any superior jurisdiction on earth, he was still publicly executed on January 30, 1649. The British monarchy was reinstated just 11 years later when Charles' son, Charles II, was crowned. The same year, the first English settlement in Africa was set up on James Island, now called Kunta Kinte Island, which was originally named after Charles's younger brother. The new monarch benefited from the ongoing expansion of the empire that had continued during England's short stint as a republic. By 1670, there were successful British colonies in New England, Maryland, and Virginia, as well as settlements in Honduras, Antigua, the Bermudas, Barbados, Jamaica, and Nova Scotia. Although the colonies of the British Empire came under the ultimate authority of the British monarchy, they were essentially self-managing, and the empire's expansion happened without much effort on the part of the royal family. However, they did benefit from the newly acquired trade routes and taxable subjects. In the late 1700s, the British monarchy, now headed by George III, lost its influence in America during the American Revolutionary War, but expanded onto a different continent, with the first British ships arriving in Australia to establish a penal colony in 1788. However, it was during the reign of Queen Victoria from 1837 to 1901 that the authority of the British monarchy truly reached its peak. Victoria had inherited a throne that was not particularly stable. Due to the reputation of her predecessors, many Brits were once again calling for Britain to become a republic. Add to this the Irish potato famine of 1845 to 1852, and it seemed that the authority of the monarchy was under threat. Victoria took all this in stride, expanding the monarchy's role to supporting charity and the arts. She soon became a beloved celebrity of her time, and she and her family had a lasting influence on popular culture, including the introduction of Christmas trees and white wedding dresses. Under Victoria, the British Empire grew by 10 million square miles and 400 million subjects. Her title of Queen of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Ireland was expanded to include Empress of India in 1876. However, the authority of the British monarchy took a hit as people gained the vote in the mid-1800s, along with other political reforms. Political reforms and a change in attitudes after the First World War led to a conference in 1926, in which it was agreed that the countries within the British Empire were equal members of a trading community. However, they all still owed allegiance to the British king or queen. The British monarch retained authority over the vast empire until the end of the Second World War. After the war, anti-colonial sentiment was on the rise, and many of Britain's colonies began to assert their independence. Amongst the first to gain sovereignty was India, which made an enormous contribution to Britain's war effort. In 1947, India became independent, and a year later there was a communist uprising against the British in Malaya, which managed to suppress the communists but still gained independence in 1957. The same year, Sudan became the first British colony in Africa to regain its sovereignty. By 1967, over 20 formerly British territories had managed to liberate themselves from British control. Today, the British monarchy's authority is purely constitutional. The duties of the current king, Charles III, include opening each new session of Parliament and approving orders and proclamations through the Privy Council. Despite not having any real authority to change anything, the king still grants royal assent to legislation. Although the current monarch has no real authority and is largely a symbolic and ceremonial position, the British royals still have plenty of power. Authority is defined as the legal and formal right to give orders and commands. Power is the ability of an individual to influence others and control their actions. So we can all agree that the Windsors still wield plenty of influence. The family directly owns 250,000 acres of land in the UK and enjoys access to a further 650,000 acres through the Crown Estate. They have a net worth of around $28 billion, with even more personal wealth as evidenced by the $500 million Charles inherited from his mother. They have over 30 grand homes, including Kensington Palace, Buckingham Palace, St. James Palace, Clarence House, Windsor Castle, Balmoral Castle, and Sandringham House. The Crown Estate is valued at around $20.5 billion and generated an estimated $410 million in 2022. Not bad for a purely ceremonial position. How would you like to get a deeper understanding of history, impress your friends, and predict the future more accurately based on past events? If this sounds like something you might be into, then check out the brand new Captivating History Book Club by clicking the first link in the description. To learn more about the history of the British monarchy, check out our book, The British Empire, a captivating guide to the largest empire in history and its impact on the Age of Discovery, transatlantic slave trade, the Americas, India, World War I, and more. It's available as an ebook, paperback, and audiobook. If you found the video captivating, please hit the like button and subscribe for more videos like this.